The City of Albuquerque Public Art Urban Enhancement Division and Department of Arts and Culture proudly present Take Another Look. Built on the foundation of two city ordinances, Art in Municipal Places, and the Urban Enhancement Trust Fund, the Public Art Urban Enhancement Division provides funds to artists to create art for the public, as well as arts organizations for arts and cultural programming. Join us as we discuss everything related to funding artists in the public realm with host Joni Palmer.
Hello, I'm Joni Palmer, and welcome back to Take Another Look at Albuquerque's public art. Today we'll be talking about Albuquerque's public art program history with art and technology projects beginning as early as 1986. So, some exciting stuff to talk about. This is the first of 3 episodes about public arts and technology. In June, we will be talking with Celestino Crowhill, a new media artist, Brian Rashup, the lead instructor of the Internet of Things Boot Camp at CNM, and Mark Leach, director of the city's Department of Technology and Innovation. And we'll be talking about art-infused technology and the Internet of Things on the rail trail. And then in July, which will be the 3rd of the 3 episodes, we'll be flipping the script. We'll be talk about using technology to analyze public arts. Denicia Malone, who joined us several podcasts ago, she's the principal planner at Rook. She will be returning to the podcast to tell us about the public arts census that was just getting started. And so in July, she will be telling us about what they learned from their work in the field. And Mandolin Sanchez, the Public Art Outreach Program Coordinator, who's been behind the scenes until now, will talk about how the Public Art Program is using technology to engage people. So, this afternoon, I am talking with Andrea Polli and Sherri Brueggemann. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Let me tell you a little bit about Andrea. She's an environmental artist working at the intersection of art, science, and technology. Often her artworks express scientific data obtained through her collaborations with scientists and engineers and have taken the form of sound art, vehicle-based works, public light works, mobile media experiences, and bio art and design. She has created and presented public artworks in 25 locations, has had over 20 solo exhibitions, and her work has been presented in over 125 international group exhibitions. Andrea holds an MFA in Time Arts from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and a PhD in practice-led research from the University of Plymouth in the UK. She is a professor here in Albuquerque at the University of New Mexico in the College of Fine Arts and the School of Engineering. As an educator, she has created student-centered professional development, theory practice, and field-based courses and experiences for practicing artists, engineers, and makers. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And Sherri Brueggemann, our division manager of the city's public art program and a strong supporter of arts and technology. Welcome back.
Thanks.
All right. Now that you've learned a little bit about my guests, I'm going to give you a little bit of context for why we're doing this set of episodes, and particularly why this first one. Okay, so we're sending 3 episodes on arts and technology because in 1986, the Albuquerque Public Art Program initiated the city's first art and technology public art project, commissioning then UNM Professor Charles Maddox to create a portable, programmable system to project laser light effects onto walls or screens calibrated to music or sound. Since then, the Public Art Program has worked to support artists to realize public installations that incorporate art-infused technology, but the program has been limited by its own definition of what was considered public art. And we talked about that in the first couple episodes of this podcast. So in 2020, the City Council voted unanimously to change the ordinance to include temporary and digital media as allowable public art forms. 2022. Yeah, I somehow I get these numbers. Yeah. In 2022, they changed the ordinance. Okay. So let's start with Sherri, and let's talk about ordinance changes and arts and technology. So we've talked in previous episodes about the changes to the public art ordinance and what it means for the maintenance of public art collection and the larger budget. Can you tell us how expanding the definition of public art impacts arts and technology, the projects that you're able to do?
Sure. Well, I want to go back 40 years to 1986 when the Charles Maddox sculpture was commissioned, because we just recently revived it and it's running in Gallery 1 right now. It's pretty awesome to see it. But I was trying to figure out how is it that they were able to fund this project back then, and so I actually went back and looked at the very original ordinance and the description of what could be art, and what I found was that the presentation that was made to the Arts Board called it a sculpture, a laser sculpture, which is basically 3 lasers, red, yellow, and green, mounted onto a framework and put in kind of like a little box, but it did laser drawings. So it was categorized as a laser that did drawings. And so it exists as an object, this kind of little sculptural box that holds these lasers. But then the lasers would be beamed out onto, clouds or fog or some other sort of atmospheric environment, or a wall like 40 feet away or something like that. And Charles Maddox programmed the lasers to make drawings, and we've been watching it in the gallery. It's super fun. It does drawings of geometric shapes. It does drawings that just kind of zoom all over the place. It does drawings of bugs and little stick figures and all kinds of fun things. So that's the way it was pitched to the Arts Board back then. And as the years went on, I don't think really anybody proposed anything as dynamic as a laser, as a work of art. But most, especially during my career here in the public art program, artists who wanted to do art and technology, usually it was like in the form of temporary public art. And that is what we had a hard time funding, because the way the ordinance was written is that the works of art needed to become permanent pieces of art into the public art collection. So we did dabble with trying to fund temporary public art that would include basically, it was kind of, we capped it off at a dollar amount that would fund basically like a fine art photograph. So we purposely had the artist create a photograph of the temporary public art, and the photograph is what came into the public art collection. So we have an archival documentation of the artwork, and so that worked pretty good for a few years. But then, artists found their temporary installations getting more and more ambitious, and so the budget amounts that they were needing to do these temporary public artworks were not really in keeping with sort of what a value of photography would be, right? So we're trying to, make that work. And then in 2019, we had the opportunity to work through the Department of Arts and Culture and the Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency to use some of their funds for a downtown lighting project. And so we issued a call for artists under a project called City Brights. And we did an open call for artists to submit lighting projects specifically to be installed in the downtown core that would light up spaces during the summer months and into the fall. And so that gave us an opportunity to really demonstrate the need for why temporary public art, especially art that uses technology, electricity, light, that is temporary, is something that people would want to participate in. They'd want to take selfies, they'd want to experience it. And so that gave us a lot of great examples that we could share with our policymakers to make the case for changing the ordinance to allow us to do that now.
Did it take a lot of convincing?
No, not really. I think it was just really what it was is bringing awareness to our policymakers that we were limited. We couldn't fund, the way the ordinance is written. It was problematic We didn't want to be in violation of what the description was in the ordinance. And people just didn't understand why we couldn't do it. So as soon as we explained why we were limited, it changed a lot.
Well, we're lucky to have that now,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you were a part of the City Bright temporary art installation back in 2019. Can you tell us about that a little bit, your experience?
That's right. Yeah, it was wonderful. We did a project for the box theater, and working with the box theater, of course, was wonderful because we're all interdisciplinary artists, and theater has so much to do with interactive art and the ideas that you use when you're making interactive art. And I worked also with my students. So I run a lab at the University of New Mexico that's interdisciplinary and supports students working in engineering and art and architecture and in even fields as diverse as biology. And so we assembled a small team and created this work for the box theater, which was really fun. And what was also really fun was the opening of all the projects that went all down, Central Avenue and the main street, and such a huge crowd of people really enjoying what they were seeing, which was really amazing.
So the Box Theater, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's on Gold Street in downtown. So it's a performance and improv and wide variety of different types of art works.
Yeah, and they do
there.
classes, I think, too, for people who want to learn improv. So it's really excellent.
Now, is it a hard sell for students to think about the kind of work that you're doing and to come into these teams?
Oh my God, no way, not at all. I mean, they are just hungry to do that. I always say, what do students want to do? They want to do what they've never done before. And they want to experiment. They want to try out new things. And a lot of what our lab has done has been kind of generated by things that students are interested in. So we've been doing probably for the past 12 or more years working with LED lights, programmed LED lights, for example. And that really came from a graduate student named Russell Bauer, who wanted to learn LED lights and was creating some projects for his thesis. And then, my lab hired him to work, and we had a little funding, and we started to experiment with more equipment. And bringing in students of computer science, bringing in art students, engineering students. I do also just want to say that, the interdisciplinary nature of creating a art and technology public artwork is not all that new, because any public artwork is going to have a need for engineering, a need for architecture, a need for these kind of interdisciplinary teams. So it's just kind of an extension of that with some new tools that are emerging.
So what do you, a couple things just came up in what you were talking about, and one of them is, how do you label? I hate to want to label, but how is it that you identify your work out there and that the students, are they saying, oh, it's arts, technology, and science? Or are they just saying, this is art? Or this is...
I think that's changed over time. I think it at a certain time, maybe the early 2000s, art and technology, and certainly in the 80s that was like a new thing, art science coming up. I think now there is much more of a big tent under which art is the defining term, so to speak. Art and science is coming back, I feel, as a term, as we have people, as I mentioned, in biology starting to integrate maybe like new materials into artwork. And so that doesn't always encompass technology, so to speak. So the art science is becoming more the term. But yeah, it's evolving all the time, the language. So
yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, depending on the media, the medium, the various players in the team, right?
And with AI now, that's a whole new.
Yeah. I'm
thing.
sure we'll be talking
Yeah.
about that in an upcoming podcast. Well, so you've done large public artworks around the country. You've done them in Germany and Croatia, and then one in particular that I really like is the wind-powered light work in Pittsburgh on the Rachel Carson Bridge. And that was back in 2017, called Energy Flow. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, how did you come up with that idea and the location?
Well, thanks. Yeah, that's a great project, and I love Pittsburgh and working in Pittsburgh. You've got roots in Pittsburgh too. Well, I had done a speculative project back after 9/11. I was living in New York City, and I was part of a group called New York 2050 that was lots of city planners, lots of people getting community members together to visualize the future. And I helped to organize that project a little bit, but I also kind of did my own speculative project. Speculative being, something maybe you can't produce or you can't produce right now. And it was putting wind turbines on the Queensboro Bridge, which was a bridge that I was very, very familiar with. I went over it to get to home and work, and to light the necklace lights, because after 9/11, there was a period of maybe 2 to 6 months where the necklace lights, those beautiful hanging lights, were turned off to save money because the city was really strapped after tourism reduced and 9/11 and all that. Sounds so long ago now with COVID and all that, but the previous kind of crisis that we'd had. And I made that proposal. I actually talked to the energy company about it. I worked with engineers to come up with like budgets and all that kind of thing. And, it was like a $3 million project, and I learned a lot, and then just kind of set it aside. That was maybe in 2004. And then 15 years later, there became this opportunity, or maybe less than 10 years later, there became this opportunity to propose something for one of the Three Sisters bridges in Pittsburgh, being recently renamed the Rachel Carson Bridge. And so I made that proposal. But what was really interesting is in that 10 years of time, technology really advanced. Right. Lighting became a lot more green and less energy consumptive. It also became a lot more controllable. So millions of colors, millions of abilities to create patterns and things with colors. So in addition to just lighting the bridge with turbines, which were custom, and I worked with a turbine manufacturer for that, we were able to animate kind of things about weather and wind power potential and all that in a very abstract way, but to have that on the bridge. And what was also interesting about that project, I think, relative to Albuquerque, is I worked with my student team on doing a public art piece, which is still up at the Anderson Abruzzo Balloon Museum, the back in the balloon-shaped window in the back, that triangular window. And that's using the same, that was a few years, maybe 2 or 3 years before the bridge project, using the same technology. And so within 2 or 3 years with students, we were able to scale up from 20 feet by 20 feet to, this gigantic 900-something span bridge. And I think that's also, for me, something that's really exciting about technology that I think Sherri touched on a little bit about this scaling of the budgets, is that, when you're learning technology on a small scale today with our phones and with the computing technology that we have available, it's so scalable, and that's so exciting.
And so what about the maintenance? I mean, we talked about this also in a previous episode, like, what about operations and maintenance for these kinds of projects? Yeah,
I mean, it's getting better, but it's right that they're temporary. The technology changes, just look at how the networks have changed so quickly. I've done several projects that are addressing aspects of networking and the way the network is structured and what's available and how to find things, the kind of software end of it also change, just maybe even more quickly. And so there's a maintenance level of that as well.
Right.
So that, you can talk about the hardware, and that has actually gotten a lot better and more stable. But when you're talking about something that's really engaging with this public sphere of the network,
Right.
that's almost completely unpredictable within 3 to 5 years.
Right, right. And so for the city, I mean, how do you deal with how do you talk with artists that are doing this kind of work and operations and maintenance?
Well, what I didn't mention, I mentioned in a previous podcast, but not on this one, that when we changed the ordinance to allow for digital and, technology media, we also changed the ordinance to allow for temporary work. So it can go away when it sort of lives its technology life. And we don't have to put tens of thousands of dollars into that particular object. We put it into new work. So we're continuing to fund artists. So it has changed the conversation with artists of saying, yeah, we want to support this. It sounds like a great idea, but we're going to have an agreement up front about sort of its shelf life. Like how long do we expect it to actually be in the public realm? And that has actually been very positive, constructive conversations that we've been having, because they understand now that if they're using technology, they want to advance with it as well. So.
Right, right.
Yeah, just to say from an artist perspective, that I think that would be very freeing, because you don't have to be kind of tethered to this maintenance contract or making sure that there are people who are trained to handle it. And we want to move on to new projects too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So you've been at UNM for how long?
15 years now.
15 years. And so going back to your students, when you're teaching your classes, how do you advertise this? How do you get students to sign up? It sounds very collaborative, co-productive kind of, exercise, right?
Well, it's a job. And so students looking for, jobs that are exciting and interesting, will go for that. And I think, it's kind of, I guess what goes to my mind is kind of the opposite, is how do you find the right person to work with a team, and, really people who are tinkering and looking under the hood of, if they play video games, do they also use the tools to kind of tinker with those video games on the coding side? If they're building things, are they, really figuring out the electronics and that? And that's kind of what we're looking for. But it doesn't have to be people who come from a particular field, because as students are doing things, they're changing their fields and they're experimenting. And that's the great thing about UNM, is students can really do that because there are so many opportunities there. So, but as far as finding people, it's kind of word of mouth, talking to other faculty that work with students. Who do you think really works? And if someone is really great to work with, I'll work with them throughout their whole time, and then sometimes even after they graduate.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great.
Yeah.
And a question for both of you is thinking about the future, and we've kind of touched on that a little bit as you've been talking about the technology evolving. So what about the intersection between art, technology, and science? Is it for artists to explore in public artworks and in public space? Where do you think that's going? Or are there some projects that are happening out there that you're seeing and you're like, yeah, that's a trajectory that sounds really exciting?
Well, for sure, with me has been a real interest in bioart and biodesign. So we've been I've been teaching a bioart and design class for about 8 years now at UNM, and we're just finding more and more interest from students in biology, students in architecture, engineering, really wanting to think about how can I make things more sustainable, how can I use materials that are better for the environment. And there's so many tools out there where people can really get their hands dirty and create new materials now. And there's a, kind of a whole like global community of people doing that. So we're connected with that. We're connected with the Biodesign Challenge. In fact, we just had selected our student team to participate in the Biodesign Challenge in New York City. And so that's, I think, one direction, but there's so many other directions too. I mean, it's vast.
Yeah.
I'll just add real quick from the public art management perspective. It's been super exciting for me because so much of my career has been spent with, the departments that we love that build the hardscapes, right? So Public Works, DMD, parks, family community centers, libraries, right? But now we are really having great conversations with our IT department, right? So Mark Leach, the director of DTI, Albuquerque Department of Technology and Innovation, I mean, he's the one who reached out to us. And so we have more conversations now so that we can really be there as artist champions in that realm to make sure that the technology is getting put into the places where they're going to need it out in the public environment.
Nice.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Now, how about how is the public? How are people responding to this? And how do you know, what are you hearing from people as they experience your work from the early years to today, and then for you in terms of this arts, technology, and science work, what are community members saying?
Well, I think we're definitely getting positive feedback. We haven't put too many pieces out there. I'll give a quick little pitch and let people know that we're going to be doing City Brights 2. That call's going to be coming out very, very soon. And so, we're going to be getting more proposals, putting more pieces out there. But the initial response has just been great.
Yeah.
I think that, yes, people are loving seeing their world animated and things happening. And there's so many of those projects happening, all over the country, all over the world, and with the city lights. And that's super exciting, revitalization of communities and people seeing, like, I can never imagine seeing things this way. I do think there's, maybe it's a need, or maybe it's something that is important to look at. We're so inundated with media and information and sometimes misinformation. And I think that it's when people see a public work that might be a visualization of data, and maybe it's related to environment, and maybe it's related to people or social issues, there's a very intense impact that can have, where people really believe they're seeing something with their own eyes and they're seeing reality. And I think there's I guess to put it in a positive spin on it, there's something really wonderful that artists can bring, that questioning or those multiple perspectives of reality to the forefront, to the public. And that's becoming, to me, I feel that's even more and more important right now, because of the fragmentation of kind of information and what might be considered truth.
Yeah,
it's kind of deep, but
that's great.
And that's actually a really good place to end. Okay. We'll end with deep thoughts. Well, anything else you want to add, that final thoughts for our audience?
Well, like I said, I just encourage people to check out the next installation of City Brights that are going to happen later this summer, 2024, going into the winter months. Obviously, we've got so much light right now; it's really great. But we want to make sure that they're going to be up. So when we say temporary, we're talking about a few months, because we want to make sure that they're going to be up long enough for people to enjoy them as the light starts to change going into the winter months.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And thank you to the city for doing this work and supporting this kind of work. It's really important. I see how important it is to students to be able to engage with their community. So,
that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks again for joining me.
Yeah.
And so, dear listeners, I hope this episode has helped you better understand a bit about arts, science, and technology, so that when we get into our next two episodes, you have a little bit of context. If you want to learn more about Andrea and her work, you can visit her website at Andrea Polli, so it's a capital A, N-D-R-E-A, capital P-O-L-L-I.com. If you're interested in seeing some art-infused technology projects, come by Gallery 1 to see the work by the 10 Internet of Things artists who went through the CNM boot camp, and we'll be talking about that in our next episode, as well as Charles Maddox's revived laser light sculpture. And their work is up until June 7th. And we hope that you can come back and check out the really interesting prototypes. I mean, come back a couple times and check it out to see, what are the possibilities for our rail trail. So let's see. You'll also find all the information that I've just provided. You'll find it in our newsletter, and you can sign up for our newsletter on the Public Art webpage at cabq.gov/publicart/podcast. So I hope you'll join us for the next episode in the series. It will be aired on Wednesday, June 12th, when we'll be talking with folks, CNM, as well as the City of Albuquerque, and a local artist. So thank you for listening, and we hope that after you've listened to this podcast, that you'll take another look at Albuquerque's public art. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the Albuquerque Public Art Program, the Public Art Collection, opportunities for artists, and so much more, visit cabq.gov/publicart. To learn more about the Urban Enhancement Trust Fund, visit cabq.gov/UETF. Tune in next time to take another look at the City of Albuquerque Public Art Urban Enhancement Division.